We won't know a couple of Oregon's biggest roster questions until the season ends.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. This episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Jordan James and Evan Stewart are curious names to think about if you are an Oregon fan. How good could the offensive line be and how quickly next year? And Oregon basketball, it just keeps exciting me. So all coming up on today's show. Let's start with those first two guys. And this is why I said what I said in the cold open of today's show. Evan Stewart and Jordan James, make no mistake about it, are massive decisions, and Noah Whittington for that matter, for the 2025 season, because Oregon's filling this portal piece here and they know what's going to happen here, but they've done that with positions where they know guys are leaving. They bring in two offensive tackles because they probably know Josh Connerly's going to the NFL draft and they know what Johnny Cornelius is out of eligibility. They bring in Bear Alexander because they know Derek Harmon's going to the NFL draft, Jamari Caldwell, maybe he's able to get the JUCO ruling on the back of the Diego Pavia situation, but that's certainly not something that you bank on if you are the coaching staff. Those are the things they know. But these are two pretty significant questions going into next year. If you take away Oregon's 1,000-yard leading rusher in Jordan James, he's well over 1,000 yards, but you take away the number one running back, even if Whittington decides to return, which I suspect he would, based on what I've seen from Noah Whittington this year, I think he could be a number one back. I like him a lot more as a number two than as a number one. Suddenly running back becomes a pretty sizable need. If Evan Stewart doesn't return, you have no veteran production in that wide receiver room. Maybe you've got Gary Bryant. Maybe, but is that a guy who you look to as being a number one? Whereas after this season, you know Trayshawn Holden's gone, you know Tez Johnson is gone, you're waiting to see what Evan Stewart does. But if Stewart were to return, he is the unquestioned number one receiver for Oregon next year. I don't think that'd even be close. I think we saw that when Tez Johnson was out. Where did Dylan Gabriel rack up all those completions? Evan Stewart, for the most part. Some of his best games of the year, not all of them. His best game was, of course, Ohio State. That was just a phenomenal performance when he went 7 catches, 149 yards, and a touchdown. But 10 for 92 against Wisconsin and 6 for 55 against Maryland. Those were the two games that Tez Johnson missed. And he averaged 8 receptions a game. So that'd be the guy who Dante Moore, Austin Novosad would look to as a number one receiver. He'd be the most experienced and proven guy in that room. But if Evan Stewart decides not to come back and he does go to the NFL and he's got NFL potential, he doesn't have to put up monster numbers, I don't think, in order to attract the attention of NFL scouts and the drafting community writ large. He could improve upon that stuff. I'm sure that'd be a selling point with whatever NIL offer Oregon would be able to give him if he returns. Because certainly, Stewart right now, I'm not an NFL draft scout expert. Troy Franklin went in the 4th round. I think Stewart overall could be a higher selection than that, but based on the productions he's had, remember, he hasn't had a 1,000-yard season. Didn't have one at Texas A&M in his 2 years there, and he's not going to have one unless he goes, like crazy bananas bonkers with, Oregon's playoff games, and of course they'd have to have 3 of those games, and he'd have to be over 100 yards in all of them. And Oregon's going to be facing some pretty darn good teams if they're able to have that end of the season that we're all looking for here. So that's a legitimate decision, and I don't think there's any way, with a national championship squarely in Oregon sights right now, I don't know that these guys are even thinking about it majorly. Connerly perhaps has. I presume that's why the conversation has taken place to the point where they add Isaiah World and Alex Harkey, the 2 transfer tackles, who we'll talk about more in the second segment on today's show. But I don't know that Stewart's decided. I don't know that James has decided. They'll have time, too. They don't have to hurry. They can focus and put all of their attention on helping Oregon win the Rose Bowl and be as prepared for that as they possibly can. But then the decision will have to arrive, and that will, kind of set in my mind whether I feel like Oregon needs to go out and get a veteran wide receiver and get a veteran running back, or whether you just let the young wave show up. Because when you're working in a new quarterback next year, whether it's Dante Moore or Austin Novosad, if you're working in an entirely brand new receiving core and also trying to figure out what your running back situation will be, Whittington could be the number one. It could be running back by committee with Jaden Lamar, Jay Harris, and Dink Riggs, some combination of those guys. I tell you what, we haven't seen a lot of him, but Dink Riggs looks really good. You might remember on Ducks versus them, I think it was Lanning or Tosh Lupo or somebody said, it's little Bucky out there. That's what he looks like. Little bit smaller, shifty, hard to tackle, strong lower half. That's what he looked like, but it's a small sample size. So is he ready to suddenly be propelled into a role where he's a borderline starting running back? Maybe. Jordan James, took a step forward. Like, James has had one of the more traditional and natural career progressions as a running back. And of course, I would love for him to return. I do feel good about the guys in Oregon's running back room. I just don't know who the number one would necessarily be. Because Whittington at his best has looked like a number one back. But then at other times this season, for significant stretches, frankly, especially early in the year, Whittington has looked like a guy who felt like more of a liability than an asset offensively, and it was just when can Jordan James get back on the field? But then you see him trucking guys against Illinois. You see him having a big game against Purdue. I've seen him be a really, really good player, but is he ready to become that number one running back? Or would Oregon maybe, if they don't get a decision on either of these guys until this winter transfer portal window closes, if that's the case, there's a spring transfer portal window. It's not quite as big as it was last year, but I imagine Oregon would go looking around. Or maybe they like the guys in that room. So just a lot of questions going both ways. And I think those are just such significant ones because you're not talking about a depth piece at running back. Or, hey, maybe Noah Whittington feels like he's ready to go to the NFL draft. I doubt it, but he could if he wants to. He can also come back. In a perfect world, Stewart and James, they'd both return. I don't know the odds that both guys come back given where they're at. Because instinctually, I say Stewart would be more likely to come back than James because he hasn't been as productive. But is that how the NFL is going to look at it? They look at a lot more than stats. Josh Allen, I don't think ever had a 60% completion percentage season whilst in college. Anthony Richardson started for 1 year. Those guys were drafted in the top 10. That's a quarterback example, but you get the point. They view things very, very differently. So those are decisions that after the season, I will be interested to see if Oregon will have a portal need come spring ball. Let me know what you think in the YouTube comments below or hit me up on Twitter at @SMcLaughlinCFB or at LockedOnDucks. How good could the offensive line be? Let's just say I'm excited. You should be too. That's coming up next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. $250 if you bet on any of the teams that won in the first round of the college football playoff, and boy, it doesn't look like it was that hard to pick those games for the most part, and you bet $5 and it was your first bet, you got $250 in bonus bets. How about that? You can also bet which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So how high should our expectations be for this offensive line come 2025? My answer is, as long as Elite Terry is around, pretty darn high. So with Harkey coming in from Texas State, where he had an 81.5 PFF grade, has been there for 3 years, has 1 year of eligibility remaining. Isaiah World was rated by 24/7 Sports as the #1 tackle available in the transfer portal. Is that really a plug and play? Not immediately. We saw this very season, Oregon's offensive line took a little while to get itself going. But by the end of the year, what do you know? One of the 3 finalists for the Joe Moore Award this season. Now, I actually felt like Oregon's offensive line in some ways was better last season, at least start to finish. However, when you look at the way that they have played, you've got a 1,000-yard rusher, a quarterback who hasn't been sacked a lot, And they've held their own and then some against some elite defensive lines in Ohio State and Michigan. Of course, they're going to have to do that again against the Buckeyes in the Rose Bowl. That unit's just been really, really good. So as long as Alik Terry is there, and Oregon should pay that guy who is looking like a young up-and-comer in the industry. I mean, Dan Lanning promotes him when Adrian Clem leaves and takes a chance. It's working. It's working really, really well. So hold on to that guy, because he, like Junior Adams, looks like one of the top non-coordinator coaches Oregon has on either side of the ball. So should we expect the offensive line to gel immediately? No, I don't. Because you're also losing Nishad Strother after this year. You're losing Marcus Harper. But you are getting back guys who we saw play this year and who did a good job. Davey Uli did a lot of good things when he got an opportunity this season. And I'd suspect that he's one of Oregon's starting guards next year. Going back to that question I've answered before on the show about why do you bring in high school guys? Why do you have... There's a timeline. It's different for everyone. Poncho played as a true freshman, started as a true sophomore. Davey Uli was a 4-star in the class of 2022. His first full season as a starter may very well be 2025. Everybody's different. But kind of looks like he's been worth the wait. When I've watched Davey Uli this year, I think he's done a really nice job in the rotation that they've had with Kavika Rogers and Harper and Strother. Like they've played 4 guys, but I think they've all been pretty capable. I do think Strother's actually been the best of all of them, and Pro Football Focus agrees, hovering his grade just a touch under 70. PFF thinks that Marcus Harper's really struggled this year. I don't know that I completely agree with that. I think Iuli and Rogers have also struggled this year. I don't know. Everyone can't be struggling there. Pro Football Focus when the offensive line is as good as it has been. But I think for Oregon, there should be an expectation of some gelling, some adjustment. And that's okay. Because we saw it this year. Gelling, adjustment, you're finding your footing. You're finding your way. But I think the high-end potential of this offensive line is crazy good. Crazy good. 2 reasons why. Number 1, these are proven plug-and-play tackles who I fully expect. Remember when Johnny Cornelius came in? He came from the FCS ranks. These guys are coming from the G5 level with the same sort of height. They were going against higher-level competition, and Cornelius came in. He's been good since day 1. So no questions in my mind about these guys' ability to take that step up in competition, because they are both experienced. They have both have proven production. They've both been, knock on wood, mostly healthy as well. So certainly you want to have depth in case one guy goes down. Big fellas can get hurt all the time because they're, in a part of the field where, you can get rolled up on really easily and boom, ankle, knee, problem, all that sort of stuff can certainly take place. But I think there is a real possibility that Oregon's offensive line next year is as good as it is this year, but in a different way. I think the tackles, though both can be great, I think it's reasonable to expect maybe a slight downgrade there. Just because Cornelius and Connerly are so darn good. However, I fully expect the interior to be better, because here's what you can't forget. Oregon has Matthew Bedford likely coming back. My understanding is that they've medically redshirted him to play next year as a 7th year. Well, if you're working him into the interior of that rotation, now you have a second-year starting center in Poncho. You'll probably have Iuli or some rotation of guys at guard, and a veteran at right guard who's giving me Stephen Jones vibes here, who I believe was a 6 or 7-year guy with the Ducks. I know he was at least 6, might have been 7. I don't remember specifically. Someone can help me out. And then you have 2 really talented, promising tackles. So I have high hopes for the offensive line. In short, very high hopes. And Mike sent in the question, when did a one and done work with an offensive line guy? A one and done with an offensive line guy. I don't know that under Lanning that has actually been there, because in 2022, the offensive line was mostly holdovers from the prior season. And then in 23, Connerly was, a guy they had recruited or kept recruiting and developed, and then they plugged in Cornelius as well. And a one and done. I mean, they brought over Junior Angalau from Texas, never worked out. Nishad Strother, not technically a one and done. He didn't really play his first year, which was a season ago because of injury. But this year, I think Strother has been quite fantastic. So yeah, I think in some respect, you're in uncharted territory. But do I believe it can work out? Yes, because Alik Terry is just showing you year in, year out, he's making a high-level offensive line. He and Mike Cavanaugh, they're doing one heck of a job with that position group. So I can't think of an example off the top of my head with an offensive lineman. If you can think of it, go for it. But it's a question. It's a question. It's not a doubt for me, though. It's just a question. Last thing before we talk basketball to wrap up today's show, because they're just exciting me again. I don't know how many of you watched Ty Thompson in the Gasparilla Bowl on Friday. It was ugly. He was 11 of 29, didn't throw a touchdown until garbage time. He had 3 interceptions. Was not good. Now, the plan, because their quarterback, Darian Mensah, transferred to Duke, was start Ty Thompson, and Ty was trying to, I think, build some film, and he did not put a lot of good film out there. So, was I curious to watch it? Yes. Was I rooting for the kid? 100%. It is abundantly clear he does not have what it takes to start at the Power 4 level, because that's a guy who has been taking practice reps over and over with that team the entire season, with Oregon the last couple of years, gets an opportunity to start, full-fledged disaster. It was a really bad day. So I don't know where he's going to end up or where he transfers. Guess what? I feel like I'm going to root for him there as well. But a couple of things to take away for Oregon going forward. First, it is easy to get attached to star ratings for any position. I am a proponent of the idea that stars matter. I do not throw out the idea that stars are everything and that's all you need. That's the first point. And that should apply to Achilles Smith Jr., JKS, Dante Moore, Austin Novosad, Luke Moga, anybody in the quarterback room that Oregon has ever had or will ever have. Or a transfer that comes in, or anybody at any particular spot. Junior Angulau was a 4-star transfer. It never really worked out. Injuries were certainly a part of it in there. But just as an example of a non-quarterback position there. Second takeaway. You have to be able to give a kid the right system. For him to be that experienced and play that poorly in his first start, the game is moving too quickly and he doesn't see things well. I think that's ultimately his biggest flaw as a quarterback. He does not process defenses well. What did he come into back in 2021? He came into Mario Cristobal and, well, I think we all have our own thoughts on how Mario is able to deal with quarterbacks and develop them. Okay, so, and remember, Tyler Shuck, I think we all agree, kind of deserved to be benched for Anthony Brown. Tyler Shuck this past year at Louisville, go look at what he did. He was really good. When he started at Texas Tech, he was quite good. So, just throwing that out there. Then, 2022, Lanning comes in. That's a different head coach and a different offensive coordinator. So, in 2 years, 2 head coaches, 2 offensive coordinators. 2023, same head coach, different offensive coordinator. 2024, different head coach, different offensive coordinator, different school. So, I know he doesn't have what it takes to overcome all of that. It turns out having a support system around a quarterback, no matter how talented he is, matters a great deal. I know we're all excited about Dante Moore. I'll talk about him plenty in the offseason. You've got every reason to be. However, why is Dante Moore at Oregon and not starting at UCLA? He threw a pick 6 in 3 straight games. These kids that are super talented at quarterback, you can't just have physical traits to play that position, and you have to be able to develop and allow them to mature. And guys that step in and play right away, they're the exception, not the rule. The rule is young guys are going to make mistakes. You've got to learn, let them develop, but you have to give them, just like in the NFL, you've got to give them a support system. I don't think Ty Thompson's ever had that, and I think it's gotten to the point where this is just who he is as a quarterback. I hope he finds an opportunity to play and succeed somewhere. I don't know what that looks like, but wishing the kid all the best. That's all for now. I'm sure many of you have thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. I have thoughts on what Oregon basketball did on Saturday. You should stick around to hear them because I'm loving it. That's coming up next. First reminder, this episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is focused on togetherness this holiday season. That means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better, and it's the perfect gift. Game Time has a feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Game Time Picks is filtering out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. When I wasn't able to get credentialed for the Big Ten championship game, you know what I did? Went straight to Game Time. You know what it was? Incredibly easy. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you want, they've got it. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Dana's cooking. Dana Altman is absolutely cooking. If I tell you going into a game, only 2 players are going to score in double figures against a team that went in 9-2, and Oregon's going to go 6 of 22 from beyond the arc, how do you think that game goes? By the way, Oregon made 4 of their first 6 3-pointers. I believe maybe it was 3 of 6 in about the first 5 minutes of the game. So they just stopped hitting threes here against Stanford. They won the game 76-61. It wasn't even that close. This was 36-19 at the half. You know that slow start thing that this squad has had a problem with? That, ultimately almost cost them the Oregon State game, almost cost them Texas A&M, almost cost them Portland. Yeah, that's not the reason they have their only loss of the year to UCLA. The Bruins got a lucky banked-in 3 and a reverse goaltending call that never should have been. And that's the only reason Oregon has lost. They're ranked number 10 in the country right now with really good reason. This was, I think, the most impressive performance Oregon has had to date. Now, is Stanford great? I don't know. That's an ACC powerhouse there. They've got 9 wins on the season. They're 9-2 going into it. They were mostly beaten up on mid-majors. They beat Cal as well, but they didn't have a bunch of marquee wins, a couple okay losses. Like, Stanford's not necessarily a great team. However, how many times have we seen Oregon basketball struggle with not great teams, not just in past years, but in this very season? I've seen it happen multiple times. So I loved this performance all around for a couple of reasons. Number one, KJ Evans had as high an impact 18 minutes as you can come up with while only making 1 field goal. He was getting fouled a lot. He ended the game with 13 points. He was Oregon's leading scorer. He just kept getting to the free throw line. He hit a 3, and he made 10 free throws in the game. He was 10 of 12, which is phenomenal. Oregon is a team, 22 of 29 at the line. That's 76%. Please shoot that percentage for the rest of the year, and I will be so happy. I will be so happy because I've watched Oregon struggle with free throws for way too long. But Evans was a tone setter at the defensive end of the floor, and everybody else was right there with him. Oregon only had 2 blocks in this game, but here are the numbers for Stanford. You ready? They shot 37% from the field. They attempted just 13 free throws. They only made 7, and they were 8 of 30 from beyond the arc. They had 9 turnovers and 8 assists. Generally speaking, basketball teams are looking for an assist-to-turnover ratio that is in the 1.5 range, 1.3 to 1.5 assists to turnover. That's a negative ratio there. And 9 turnovers isn't even a lot. It's just that Oregon's defense was incredibly stifling, and offensively, it was so balanced. The way they moved the ball was as fluid as I can remember. I am amazed that this is the same Dana Altman. I mean, I'm not amazed because I know that he's a great coach and always has been and always will be. At this time last year, what I remember talking about on this show with this team was, man, they just don't move the ball. It's stagnant. They try to force it to Dante or Evans or whoever the big man on the floor is, and they just don't move. And then they wait for a late shot clock and try to create. This team is not like that at all. If you don't have someone that can match up with Nate Biddle, they will force feed him. And it's great because he is incredibly skilled and very talented. But this team is playing such a cohesive brand of basketball, and this was on display from the moment this game got going. There was a point where Stanford had a 2 or 3 point lead, and I thought they should be up by 7-10, or else this might get ugly. And it got ugly quick. 36-19 at the break, remember. For that team that starts slow, that can't get out of the gate. 36-19. This is a neutral site game. Can be tough to get up for. Oregon didn't have a problem with it. So Evans had 13 off the bench. Shellstad had 10. He didn't hit a single three. He's still kind of struggling to shoot threes. I don't know. I struggle to worry about him and shit. He's 28% from beyond the arc. The guy was 35% last year. I think Shellstad will be able to figure it out. It's just a shooting slump. He'll shoot his way out of it. But you just had a bunch of guys with anywhere from 7 to 9 points. Angel, 7. Biddle, 9. Tracy, 7. Bamba, 9. Cook, 8. Supreme Cook was awesome. I love his energy off the bench. He is such an important depth piece here. And Barthélemy had 8. Raheem Moss had a nice game with 5 points. I just thought this was the most complete effort that we have seen so far. They looked and played like the number 10 team in all of college basketball. Is Stanford great? No. But this is how you play, regardless of environment, regardless of opponent, regardless of time of year. Oregon gets to carry this into the holiday break. They come out on the other side, and they've got one more game where they should roll. They'll play Weber State at home on December 29th at 2 p.m. Pacific time. I believe that game is on Big Ten Plus. They should be able to win that game very comfortably and move to 12-1. 12-1. And remember, now, granted, they could have lost you could say they should have lost the Portland game. They could have lost the Oregon State game. Oregon State's a pretty solid team, by the way. But the only loss that Oregon has is a desperation, step back, banked 3 that, what are you going to do? I mean, you got Biddle's there contesting. He didn't foul. It's well defended, the whole 9 yards. What are you going to do? So I'm stoked because these guys, the only player to log 30 or more minutes was Shellstad. Remember what it was at the end of last season when they made that great run to the round of 32? It was Couisnard and Dante, and nobody else could get going. I feel like anybody can get going. If Couisnard had an off day during that great run, Oregon would have lost, unquestionably. Now, you could have 2 guys with an off day, and Oregon's just fine. The depth of scores and the depth of defenders on this team, I'm all about it. I am all about it. I think 2 of my better predictions ever. Predictions, podcast hype man moments, you call it whatever you like. I said coming into this year, Oregon's defensive line is going to be the best since 2014. 100% accurate, probably better. They don't have, Derek Harmon's a first round pick. Mateo could be next year. So they kind of do. But the depth is unquestionably stronger. Defoe and Armstead were so good. But the depth is unquestionably stronger on this year's unit. And the other one I said was this Oregon men's basketball team is not going to finish 6th in the Big Ten. That is certainly not how it looks. The Big Ten's good. Big Ten's got some real teams. Real teams. Illinois is good. Purdue is good. Washington's not terrible per se. We know UCLA is good. Already saw that. Michigan State. Michigan's in the top 25. Wisconsin's good. Oregon's got to play all these teams. And they're going to lose some of them. But I think they're going to be able to win plenty of them. And finally be an at-large team and not have to win the conference tournament. Winning the conference tournament, great. Momentum, I'm here for it when the time comes. But in the meantime, I hope they keep playing this way. If they do, they will comfortably be a top 3 to 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. And historically, that's where you need to be to make a run. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And go Ducks. Actually, hold on. No, I'm bringing it back. I could edit that out, but I try to be honest with you all. I just want to let you know, Merry Christmas Eve and Happy Holidays to everybody out there. No show tomorrow on Christmas Day. No show on the 26th either. I will be back on Friday. I hope you can allow me a little bit of a holiday break. I'll probably be riding Space Mountain. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.